Zelensky didn't start this fight either. I'm Michael Smerconish in Philadelphia. You've seen the highlights. I recommend you watch it all. For 40 minutes yesterday in the Oval Office, there was a frank and civil exchange. And then it all hit the fan. It began when a Polish journalist asked President Trump, "What's your message for those who think you're too close to Putin?" And President Trump's response, in my opinion, totally appropriate. The former New York City real estate developer said he wasn't aligned with Putin, that he's aligned with America, that he's aligned with the world, that he's aligned with Europe, and that if he belittles Putin, he'll never be able to negotiate a deal, especially where President Zelensky's hatred for Putin is so evident. And then Trump called for one more question. But before the media could respond, Vice President J.D. Vance asked to be heard, or as the Wall Street Journal lead editorial today notes, he offered a, quote, odd interjection. He blasted former President Biden. He said the path to peace is through diplomacy. He noted that America has tried thumping its chest, but that approach had failed. Then President Zelensky responded with a brief history of Russian aggression in the last decade. Zelensky wanted it understood that Putin had violated agreements, that he continued to kill people, didn't honor a ceasefire, and didn't exchange prisoners as he had promised. "So what kind of diplomacy do you speak of, JD?" he then asked. And Vance turned the tables. After having started this debate, he changed the subject and said that it was unfair to litigate in front of the American media. And that was it. The tone shifted, the language grew sharp. President Trump took umbrage at Zelensky saying that the United States was protected by an ocean, but that it would feel pressure in the future. "You're in no position to dictate what we would feel," said Trump. "You don't have the cards," said Trump. "You're gambling with World War III," said President Trump. He then told Zelensky he was being disrespectful. And Vance chimed in and said, "You've not told us thank you." On one thing, all sides can sadly agree. Trump said that it would make for great television, and it was. I've watched the final 10 of the 50-minute presser 3 times. Each time I see something new. And soon after the Oval Office exchange, I watched live as Zelensky sat with Bret Baier on Fox News and answered some appropriate but sharp questions without flinching or offering an apology. Here's where I come out. Zelensky's a mensch. He's a stand-up guy with a Churchillian spine who's proven wrong those who said that an actor and comedian was unsuited to go toe-to-toe with Putin. He has, and he and his country are still standing. Yes, with the benefit of a lot of American support. Vance lit the fuse. He injected himself into the fray, made an argument, then cried foul when Zelensky offered a rebuttal. And Trump, seeing the spotlight turn toward his number 2 and a visiting head of state, took control and escalated the language. I don't like that Trump recently excluded Ukraine from the meeting with Russia in Saudi Arabia, or that Trump incorrectly blamed Zelensky for Russia's invasion. And Trump was wrong to say that Zelensky is a dictator while remaining silent on Putin. Plus, it was a disgrace. It was a disgrace on Monday that in a UN vote, the U.S. voted with Russia and North Korea instead of its European allies in refusing to blame Russia for starting the war. It's all rather embarrassing, unless it results in a deal. See, this is the true test of a transactional president. Can the art of the deal bring about the end of the war? I think it's offensive to ask Ukraine for reimbursement, backward-looking, for American aid. That sets a bad precedent, telling a friend threatened by an invading force and no friend of ours, well, we'll help you, but only for a price. If, however, there's a mineral deal to be struck in our mutual interest, let's do it. And if after striking that agreement, Trump can resolve a 3-year-old war in a way that Biden could not, and which protects Ukraine's sovereignty, I'll be the first to say this was all worth it. And maybe you deserve a Nobel Prize, Mr. President. But until then, I'm going to keep thinking that the bullying and the browbeating of the Ukraine president by the American president and vice president was unnecessary and out of bounds. One more thing occurs to me. Yesterday, a conservative journalist asked President Zelensky about his attire, noting that he wasn't wearing a suit. And this entire scene played out in an Oval Office that once again showcases a bust of Winston Churchill. There he is, by the way, between President Trump and Vice President Vance. Churchill, who, it should be noted, during World War II would often wear his famous siren suit, so-called because it could be slipped on and zipped up when air raid sirens went off. Yes, Churchill wore this even in the presence of foreign leaders and heads of state. There he is with General Eisenhower, future president of the United States. I want to know what you think. Go to my website at Smerconish.com. Answer today's poll question. Who bears the most responsibility for the Oval Office argument? Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Volodymyr Zelensky, or all equally? So there's the voting thus far. We'll keep the poll up there. Wow. Whoa. I'm startled by the number of votes. 79,312. Damn. Who bears the most responsibility? Trump number 1, Vance number 2. Add those two together, by the way, and see what you get. All equally, Zelensky just 4%. I disagree with that outcome, but I'm usually in the minority. Quickly, one social media reaction is probably all I'm going to have time for. What astounding voting. This was nothing more than kabuki theater yesterday being played by stars Trump and Vance, WWF-style rock'em sock'em robots, now you're talking my language, down to the reporter asking the attire staged, but not for our entertainment. It was a blank show, as I've said earlier. It was a cluster. I mean, fill in the blank. I'm willing to be impressed and surprised at the end. If there's a deal that's negotiated that protects the sovereignty of Ukraine, is in the United States' best long-term interest, then I look forward to coming back here and saying, you know, Donald Trump deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. But until that time, I don't like the way in which our guest and our friend and ally was treated. I know who won. I don't know who started it. Well, I do, Vance, but I know who won, Putin. If you missed any of today's program, you can always listen anywhere you get your podcasts. Thanks for watching. See you next week.